police had discovered this body that had been burned to a crisp, filled with bullet holes, in a truck, a GMC Yukon. And beyond that, everything else was kind of a mystery.
In the summer of 2017, up a logging road and off the main highway, police in Squamish, BC find a vehicle, burned to a crisp, and inside, a dead man. It took little time for the police to declare the death a homicide. What took more time was to figure out just who this guy was. Originally, the only name they could connect to the man was Jesse James. But very quickly, it became obvious that Jesse James was not his real name. It took 3 years to learn his real identity, and when that was discovered, a gripping new podcast was born. One that involved rock climbing, cryptocurrency, neo-Nazis, and penis enlargement pills. Host Steven Chua takes us along on the adventure to uncover who the real Jesse James was in his new podcast, Dirtbag Climber. And just a quick disclosure, I can vouch for this podcast because I helped produce it. I'm Kathleen Goldhar, and this is Crime Story. Steven, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So it's the summer of 2017. Police discover this burned out vehicle. Tell me more about the scene. Set it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what we're looking at is a logging road pretty close to a very popular campground and lake, Cat Lake, in Squamish, British Columbia. It used to be a bit of like a remote logging town, but as of the last 10, 20 years, it's become increasingly popular. Not so much for industry anymore, but for tourism. So a lot of people go there because of the natural scenic beauty. They go there to get away from the city. It's like a place filled with beautiful lakes, forests. A lot of outdoor recreation is very popular there. So you get rock climbing, mountain biking, kite surfing, all that sort of thing. And the site where that incident occurred is basically pretty close to a regular summertime hangout for a lot of people. Everyone loves to go to Cat Lake to camp, to swim, to hang out, just to shoot the breeze with their friends and, knock back a few cold ones. And just a little bit outside of the lake are these networks of logging roads, which is basically how a lot of Squamish basically got its access to all these beautiful natural scenic areas. And in one of those areas, there was a dude who liked to camp and live out of his van. And we found at that time that police had discovered this body that had been burned to a crisp, filled with bullet holes, in a truck, a GMC Yukon. And beyond that, everything else was kind of a mystery. Over time, we learned that this guy, the guy who was in the truck, was a pretty well-known climber in town who went by the name Jesse James. But aside from that, there wasn't really any information about that.
And he was, and this was the title of the podcast, a dirtbag climber. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. Dirtbag climber is a guy or girl or whoever that lives to climb. They only work just enough, or maybe they don't work at all, just so they can have enough money to keep on climbing as much as possible. So you'll often find these people in places like Yosemite or Squamish or Indian Creek, or very popular places for rock climbing. You'll see people just living in their cars or vans or trucks, basically living hand to mouth, so they can squeeze out as many dollars as possible, so they can forego work for as long as possible, so they can keep on climbing for as long as possible. And the term originated with a very famous pioneering climber named Fred Beckey, where he basically would do nothing but live basically in poverty, so he could spend as much time climbing. It's an interesting kind of mindset because it's almost monastic in a certain way. You're living on 50 cent ramen or whatever, or working maybe one day at McDonald's just so you can have enough money to eke out as much climbing time as possible.
So let's talk about who he was, because that's the more interesting part of the story. I mean, climbing, all that fascinating. It's like the real heart of this small town in BC. But nobody would have heard of this story outside of Squamish if it wasn't for finally the police realizing who this guy was.
Yeah, and what a bombshell that was.
Yeah.
It was, it turned out that the guy that went by Jesse James, surprise, surprise, his name's not really Jesse James, as probably many of you could figure out. It turned out that the cops ran his DNA through databases. It came up empty in Canada, but it did ring out positive in the States. So it turned out to be an American named Davis Wolfgang Hawke. And if you just did a little bit of searching, you'd realize this individual had a very storied, colorful history of doing all sorts of crazy things. He was initially involved in his university, as he was known as the campus Nazi. He was a chess prodigy as a child. He was one of the pioneers of junk mail spam, internet scamming. And he had like big internet service providers like AOL suing the pants off him. And he eventually got into crypto, where he supposedly became, after sinking enough money into Bitcoin, a millionaire or even a billionaire. And then after that, you realize that Davis Wolfgang Hawke isn't even his real name either. It's his legal name, which he changed into. Turns out that he was born Andrew Britt Greenbaum. And on top of that, like, there were many different identities, many different names which he went by, and each one was kind of like its own little rabbit hole that you could go into and spend a lifetime kind of exploring.
Well, let's start with Andrew Britt Greenbaum. So as a Goldhar, it didn't take me very long to realize that the name Greenbaum was Jewish.
Yeah.
But Andrew Britt Greenbaum changed his name to Davis Wolfgang Hawke and became known even before university, college, and high school as a neo-Nazi.
Yeah, it's so crazy. So he was, just a regular kid growing up in a reasonably affluent suburb around Boston. But at a certain point, he started getting into extremist ideologies, and he became fascinated with Nazism and all the stuff surrounding that. And it was this change that his classmates started to observe a bit in high school, and it became very, very pronounced in university. And to the point where he said, yeah, okay, I'm going to change my name to Mr. Super Aryan dude into Davis Wolfgang Hawke. And he wound up starting a chapter online for white supremacists to kind of congregate, and he would create a newsletter, and he would, write all these very extremist views and subtract from his followers a subscription fee. So one of the interesting things that we kind of wrestle with in this podcast is just like, did he really believe in it? Did something happen that really turned him that way? Or was this just one of his many cons that he was running? Was he just someone that knew how to find a vulnerable group that would be willing to follow him, metamorphosize into whatever role that group wants him to be, and then just try to extract as much as he can out of them? So that's like one of the fundamental questions that we're kind of looking at into this.
It's certainly sort of a question we tried to get his father to answer, because it was his father who was the Jewish portion or the Jewish part of his family. Can you tell me about that? Because his dad had what I found to be sort of a surprising response to his son's turn to Nazism. Yeah,
it was surprising for all of us. And he was I'm paraphrasing here, but he had more of a, oh, boys will be boys kind of of a reaction. And I don't know what to think about that, honestly. His father was definitely of the opinion that, like, oh, okay, Andrew just wants to be popular. He wants to be influential. He's just doing this to play a role. And if you look at some of because he did appear in the news and in a few other cases, he does almost look sometimes like he's cosplaying, because it's just it's almost comically Nazi, if that makes sense. Like he has the mustache of Hitler. He has like, he's dressed up in the full SS uniform. He's like, yeah, 1940s cosplaying mode almost. So I can see why his dad might think that, but at the same time, it's also kind of a strange reaction to have if you were a Jewish man and your son is totally going off the deep end and attracting this kind of crowd and trying to organize like a massive white supremacist march, for example.
So that was one of the things that that march that you alluded to, he wanted to have a big million-man march on Washington. He was organizing it, but it didn't work out. Can you tell us why it blew up in his face?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's for the reason that you were able to deduct very quickly on. Greenbaum, and once his name got out in the press, the Southern Poverty Law Center did a story on him, and it was basically splashed his real name, all over the headline. I think it was something like Hyman Greenbaum's son hard at work as the campus Nazi, like something to that effect. And all these white supremacist folks who were following him were just like, oh my God, we're following a Jewish guy. What are we doing?
It's funny and it's not funny.
It's crazy. Yeah. So all these super Aryan Nation people were just like, we can't follow this guy anymore. And some of them really came out quite strongly against him. And in some cases, he had a pretty legitimate reason to be fearful for his safety. And in response, he's the type of guy that he doesn't really back down. Instead of, apologizing and be like, sorry, I shouldn't have done this. Instead, he's like, no, I'm going to go even further. I'm going to organize this march to prove how much of a Nazi I am. I'm going to double down on this, and I'm going to bring 1 million people to Washington. We're going to have this insane Nazi march, and no one will ever question my dedication to the cause again. But as I'm sure many people could imagine, it didn't work out well that way.
What happened?
No, I can't say no one showed up, but a handful of people showed up, and he very quickly realized that, oh, okay, this shtick that I have is not working, and he just hightailed it out of there. He did not show up for the Million Man March, and ultimately, what happened is there was a huge counter-protester movement that was there, and when as the day passes by, they realize, oh, there's no Nazis showing up. It just turned into a great big block party celebrating, the fact that they chickened out. So
they chickened out.
Yeah, exactly.
Did anybody threaten his life? I mean, I know part of the podcast is to try to at least think about who might have been the one who wanted to kill him. We've sort of hit that first point of his life where he made people pretty upset. Did anybody ever threaten him once they found out who he really was? There
were definitely people who were very unhappy that they had been duped by a person who was pretending to be something that they weren't. And so in some cases, there were individuals who were very angry, and it's probably safe to say meant him quite a bit of harm coming from like the Nazi spectrum of things. But the other things that we explore in the podcast have to revolve around the other lives that he led. And in each of those lives that he led, he managed to piss a lot of people off. For example, as a scammer, he was basically selling fake penis enlargement pills across the internet.
You mean there's real penis enlargement pills? He's selling the fake ones.
I cannot say, but they might be out there. I just haven't found them.
But his were not real.
His were not real. It was like if you received spam emails in your inbox in the early 2000s or so, asking you if you'd like to buy penis enlargement pills. It was probably Andrew or Davis or Jesse or whatever you want to call him, because he was one of the first people to really hop on that and understand the potential to just like find a new way to manipulate people and extract their money. So one theory. Yeah,
I
go
did.
ahead.
The thing that I found about him too is he was really so bright, and he was always on the edge of that, right? Like when he was the neo-Nazi getting the subscriptions and doing his website, now that's nothing burger because that's in every aspect of our lives. We're being asked to do those things. But he when he was doing it, very few people were doing it. He understood the internet's potential long before any of us did. And even when it came to spamming, right? Like he took AOL by surprise, right? He was a
100%.
very bright man.
He was. And I think that's kind of the attraction that we have when we're working on a project like this, because a lot of us on the team, yourself included, because you did a ton of work on this, referred to him as like the patient zero for a lot of the internet stuff that we're seeing right now. Like he had an understanding of the internet that predated a lot of what we are now seeing become very commonplace. So being able to disseminate a lot of fake information and extract money from people for it, like he was great at that right at the start. He was into crypto, which is now huge, and he saw that coming decades before any of us, tried buying like 0.001 Bitcoin from Wealthsimple for fun or whatever.
Yeah.
He saw so many things way ahead of their time. He was also into biohacking and trying to live forever as this vegan, superhuman, immortal dude, which we're now looking and we're seeing like a lot of like tech bro type people following in that same vein. So he is kind of like a precursor to our times, and he didn't even know it. And it's kind of fascinating to see like this be the first iteration of what we are very much seeing commonplace right now.
AOL finally got a hold of him or decided to try to stop him. That was a pretty huge deal. Can you tell us a bit more about that whole AOL fight?
Yeah, it was a kind of gargantuan legal battle. So AOL, for many of us who grew up in like, the 90s, 2000s, AOL was the behemoth of its day. It was the biggest internet service provider. It wasn't a search engine like Google was, but you can kind of compare it in terms of size and scale to a Google type enterprise. It was huge. It was the biggest game in town. And AOL started noticing that, there's this guy that is sending out millions, maybe even billions of these emails to these email addresses that we host. And this is really degrading the user experience. Like instead of seeing emails from, your uncle or nephew or son or brother, you're getting these penis enlargement emails clogging up your inbox. This is not what we want for our user experience. So thanks to Jesse James, Davis Wolfgang Hawke, whatever, there were lobbying efforts that made their way up to Congress, and eventually Congress passed legislation, one called like the Canned Spam Act, that allowed ISPs like AOL to prosecute spammers as if they were criminals. And when that happened, AOL was just like, okay, finally, we can do something about this. So they dragged Jesse to court, sued him for tens of millions of dollars, and were just like, you have to pay up because you've been destroying our product. And what happened was Jesse, in true Jesse fashion, was just like, no, I'm not going to do that. So instead, he converted a sizable portion of his earnings into gold, buried it in various locations, converted another portion of his earnings into Bitcoin, hid that in the dark web, and then just started bouncing around the States until he made his way up to Canada. And eventually, he would appear in his final form in Squamish, British Columbia, as a dirtbag.
And that dirtbag thing, I mean, it's so interesting if you think back to the Wolfgang Hawke versus Jesse James. They're polar opposites.
In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. So what they do have in common is their love to thumb their nose at authority. Mm-hmm. They, like Jesse James and Davis Wolfgang Hawke, both love to just piss people off. They love to troll around. But the main difference between the two was the fact that Jesse James I don't want to say was like an advocate or an activist, but he had very different views around white supremacy. So in the climbing community at the time, and this is still probably ongoing to a certain degree, there was a lot of debate around the kinds of people who get to go climb or who show up in outdoor sports and stuff like that. And there was a big push around, the late 2010s about diversity and all that sort of thing. And there was one camp that was pretty indifferent or ambivalent to it. And then there was another camp that was just like, no, we need more diversity in the sport. It's traditionally, when you look at like magazines or advertisements or whatever of people rock climbing, it's usually like very macho white dudes. And Jesse, he would post a lot on messaging forums. And when the topic did come up, he would be like, hey, there are actually some people of color athletes who deserve way more attention than they're getting. And he'd name like people like Kai Leitner, who's like a very like prominent like person of color in the climbing community, and a few other people who he thought deserved a lot more attention. So in that sense, his views around race seem to be quite different from what they were as Davis Hawke, for sure.
Did any of his climbing friends know of his past before he died?
As far as I know, they knew nothing. And they tell me they knew nothing. I don't know if maybe they knew more than they were letting on. But in talking to those folks, what I kind of kept on getting was a picture of a dude who liked to be a contrarian, a bit of a troll. But if you got to know him and if you, spent some time with him, he turned out to be like a very helpful, nice dude, albeit a dude with a bit of, an attitude, but still a helpful, nice dude. And at least the way that I've heard it was like back in the day, when climbing was less mainstream, it was kind of regular to get very strange, colorful characters climbing. And if like, I lived in Squamish for quite a long time, for 8 years. And like, I did meet like a few of the older climbers, and they all tend to be like very colorful characters. They have like names that kind of sound like they come out of action movies. Like the dude's like King Canal or Heavy Duty or whatever. Like that's how people know them around town. So, for a guy to be going around calling himself Jesse James, it's like, oh, another weird dude. Well, there are a lot of weird dudes here, so.
So they probably knew his name wasn't really Jesse James, but they just accepted that was what he wanted to be called. Yeah,
exactly. It's most people thought that his name was Jesse, but James, they were just like, oh, it's probably Jesse Smith or Jesse whatever. Who knows what it is.
Did you ever come to any conclusion about why he chose the name Jesse James? Did he have some kind of connection to the original outlaw? Do you think that there was something that appealed to him in any way?
Oh, for sure. There's definitely this kind of romantic kind of image that we all have of Jesse James, this guy who's totally free, running from the law, living life in his own terms. And I think this Jesse very much tried to emulate that in his time in Squamish. He was basically flying under the radar, under a fake name, never like avoiding authority. And we've seen that he took great pains to avoid authority. He was literally also running from the law in many cases because he was running from people who were trying to sue him. And then prior to that, people who he pissed off during his stint as a Nazi. So he was always running, changing shape, changing form, finding new lives and these new identities. And Squamish really allowed him to do that because he's literally just out in the middle of the woods, camping in his truck, no known address, just this guy wandering around in the woods, climbing as he pleases, and with little to no one really knowing of his true identity. And a lot of that, I think, mirrors the kind of romantic ideas that a lot of people have of Jesse James, this guy, living this nomadic, in some cases, almost carefree kind of life, free from authority, just living life on his own terms.
Interesting too, because people knew he was very wealthy, right?
There were whispers. So it wasn't an absolute fact, but there were a lot of rumors around town that he would be flashing cash, that he had like a fortune stored in this weird thing called Bitcoin that nobody could understand. But at the same time, there'd be people be like, well, if you're so rich, why do you live in a truck? This makes no sense. And then we've encountered people who kind of were talking about that paradox where like he'd come in and because like he definitely loves being the center of attention. He'd talk about how spectacularly wealthy he was. And then one shop owner would just be like, listen, man, you live in a truck. What's going on here? And then he takes out these wads of cash, like a pop can width of cash and throws it on the table. And it's just like, well, what do you think of me now, basically? And then the guy's just like, oh, okay. So yeah, people had an inkling that he was quite wealthy, but the fact that he also kind of lived as a dirtbag also made it hard for people to put together sometimes.
Or those who understood the lifestyle understood why the money didn't really matter to him, I guess, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Can we go back to his death? So what did police find? They found that he was shot, right? That's how they think he died before the car was put on fire.
That's correct.
What else do we know about his death? What have the police told us about their investigation, about where they're at with things?
Yeah, it's been a very long and very arduous investigation because the police have been looking into this for quite some time. And when we try and talk to them, unfortunately, they kind of keep on going back to the same things where like, yeah, we're looking into it. We can give out like these details that basically he was shot, the car was burned, truck. But when we try to press them further, they cannot or will not give us any details. So a lot of what we try to do in this story is try to flesh out a little bit more detail around like who could have done it, why did it happen, how did it happen, and we run through a number of different theories that lead up to that point in the story. But at least on the cops' end, it seems like it's a very tough case for them because they've been very close-lipped about it, and it's been 5 years as of this recording time, about 5 years since they made that announcement about his true identity. And there haven't been any breakthroughs on the cops' end. So it's kind of, yeah, a very big question mark. And we like to, at least in our part of the story, dig into like, well, what's going on?
Yeah. Do you have any theories? What do you think? Who do you think killed him?
Oh man, there's so many. So like my personal inclination is that if this guy, had a mouth on him and was flashing cash around, someone who likes money, and there are a lot of people who like money around town, probably was just like, oh, okay, well, here's a guy that has amazing amounts of cash on hand. Maybe I can get a little bit of that myself. There was a good chance that he was connected to the climbing community or was part of the climbing community because those people knew that he was living in his truck in Cat Lake. And maybe there was some sort of struggle. Maybe he knew a bit about Bitcoin and tried to extract that from him. And then it just turned out the wrong way. There are a number of different theories, though, that we've heard, and some of them run the gamut from being like kind of plausible to like absolutely crazy. So my favorite one was that a Brazilian psychologist put out a hit on him because of.
Oh yeah, we haven't even talked about this.
Yeah, exactly, because of a book he wrote, and this Jesse wrote so many. He had so many schemes going on. One of his schemes was to write a seduction book. That you can still probably find on Amazon.
You can. We looked it up.
Yeah, exactly.
What was it called?
And oh man, Off the
I'm
top
gonna
of my
search
head,
it.
I'm not
Hold
sure.
on.
Yeah, let's Google it. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's.
What name did he have? Was it Jesse James that he wrote it under?
Yes, it was Jesse James.
Seduction.
The Psychology of Seduction, Master the Psychology of Attraction and Seduction by Jesse James.
Right.
There we go. Yeah. So the theory of that is that much of what was written in that book was material that was created by this Brazilian psychologist. And the psychologist got very angry that it was ripped off and hired hitmen to kill him. And they killed him. So that's just one of the many theories. And yeah, because this guy had so many things going on, there could be something to, I don't know about all of them, but a few of them.
And that's just another example of
ridiculous.
him being ahead of the time, because he was like a pickup artist before pickup artists existed.
Yeah. And he was into the whole sort of like, that arrangement reminds me very much of like, the 4-day work week, Tim Ferriss kind of thing. Oh, just write like an ebook and then sell it online and it's passive income for the rest of your life. Like he was already doing this. He knew.
Amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
So he had so many identities, and I know just talking now, we've only talked about the 3 big ones, but he really did have tens of names that he used. I'm curious, to wrap things up, if you felt like you ever actually figured out who he was. Like, who was Jesse James? Who was that man who they found in the truck?
Oh, that is a head scratcher for sure. I don't think I'm ever going to really truly know who he was or what his intentions were. But I feel like there was a common pattern throughout his life where one thing that I can say for sure about him is that he was very gifted at like finding weaknesses in people that he could kind of play around with and use to gain influence over them. And he just keep on like, regardless of what skin he put on, he keep on replicating that over and over and over again. And then at some point, the pattern goes, his ego usually kind of leads him to like kind of bite off more than he can chew, or to like do some sort of grandiose thing that kind of attracts attention from people in the wrong way. And then after that, oh no, things go wrong. And then the cycle continues over and over and over again. I don't think I'm ever going to know if he was actually a white supremacist or if he was just doing that for play. But I do know that he liked money, and he definitely made that a very big part of his work as a neo-Nazi, then as a spammer, then as a crypto millionaire, billionaire, and so on and so forth. So those are the 2 things that I can say for sure. He liked money. He was gifted at influence. He was very good at influencing people and kind of, in some ways, like bending certain personalities to his will, and then capitalizing on that in whatever way.
Cool. Well, Steven, this was like a fascinating year to spend looking into this guy. And you did such a great job. And I can't wait for people to get this and binge it, because it's a great podcast. So thank you for joining us and chatting about it.
And thank you for all the work that you've done. You're underselling yourself here, because you're a massive part of the reporting team. So yeah, I mean, you should give it up for yourself too.
Okay, Mutual Admiration Society. Thanks, Steven.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Crime Story from CBC Podcasts. You can hear the show ad-free by subscribing to CBC True Crime on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow us there on Apple or on Spotify. You can also find us on YouTube, where we release video episodes every week. Just search and subscribe to CBC True Crime.